In a moment that left even palace aides speechless, Princess Beatrice, normally poised, polished, and private, broke down in front of flashing cameras while speaking about her father, Prince Andrew. What began as a controlled interview turned into an emotional implosion, reigniting the scandal that Buckingham Palace has desperately tried to bury. Why now? And what was said that shattered her resolve? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The breakdown wasn't just tears, it was a rupture of years of restraint. Beatrice stood before a line of microphones, her hands trembling slightly as she began to read a carefully worded statement. But the moment she reached the line that mentioned her father's name, her composure cracked. Her voice faltered, eyes darting as if searching for an anchor in a sea of chaos. Then came the sob, short, sharp, and audible even over the relentless camera clicks. The royal press corps froze. For a moment, even they seemed to forget this was a performance of power and image. This was a daughter unraveling under the weight of a legacy she never chose. Within minutes, the footage exploded across social media platforms. News outlets scrambled to confirm its authenticity, while headlines screamed of a royal meltdown. The palace was caught flat-footed. No official comment was issued. No aide stepped forward. It was clear they hadn't rehearsed for this. This was not in the script. Commentators, many of whom had covered the royal family for decades, declared it the most unfiltered moment of any Windsor in modern history. Body language analysts dissected her gestures. Lip readers tried to catch the words she whispered before storming off. And yet, what lingered in the minds of millions wasn't what she said, it was what she didn't. The haunting silence that followed her final statement echoed louder than any prepared address. Her last words, nearly drowned in the storm of her emotion, were simply, "I tried to stay silent." But silence became complicity. And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving a void that no spokesperson could fill, no headline could quite explain. But behind that very public collapse lies a deeper storm brewing within the royal corridors, one that traces back to private confrontations and years of bottled pain. Long before headlines and accusations, there was a little girl holding her father's hand, unaware of the storm that would one day define her royal identity. Princess Beatrice has lived in the eye of a scandal since childhood, but how much did she really know? And how did being Prince Andrew's daughter shape her destiny? The story begins not with public disgrace, but with private devotion. Beatrice idolized her father, clinging to his presence in the glittering halls of the palace and the quiet rooms behind closed doors. To her, he wasn't the man the tabloids would later eviscerate, he was simply Papa. But as the cameras turned their attention toward Andrew with increasing suspicion, Beatrice was forced to grow up within a world that whispered truths no child was ready to hear. Even at an early age, the tension surrounding her father was palpable, though never discussed outright. Silence in the royal family wasn't avoidance, it was policy. The less said, the safer it was. That silence became a constant companion, wrapping itself around birthdays, ceremonies, and family gatherings like an invisible guest no one dared acknowledge. As the years progressed and Andrew's name became a fixture of royal controversies, Beatrice found herself trapped between two realities: the affectionate daughter who defended him with every breath, and the grown woman who watched the walls close in around him. While her public appearances exuded composure, her private life was riddled with doubt. She began questioning things she had once accepted blindly. Why were certain relatives colder? Why did her presence at events suddenly provoke side glances? The pressure to protect the family's image fell on her shoulders, but no one told her how heavy that would feel when her own father was the epicenter of the storm. Despite her unwavering loyalty, Beatrice struggled to find her footing among senior royals. She was never quite embraced with the same warmth Catherine or even Zara seemed to receive. There was always a distance, subtle yet unmistakable. Her name carried the weight of her father's sins, and no matter how dutifully she performed her engagements, the public eye remained skeptical. Even her education, celebrated in official channels, was quietly undermined by the media's persistent reminder of who her father was. Her every achievement came tethered to the scandal she didn't create, but could never escape. Beatrice once confided to a close friend, "Every title, every event I carried him with me." Those weren't words of resentment, but resignation. She had accepted that her identity, at least in the public sphere, would always be inextricably tied to his. And yet, even as the scrutiny deepened, she held onto a sliver of hope that she might carve a space of her own, untouched by the headlines and guilt by association. That hope was fragile, but it was hers. And just when she thought she could live a life of her own, one invitation shattered her illusion of independence forever. It was meant to be a quiet royal dinner. But behind the gilded walls of Windsor, Princess Beatrice found herself in an unexpected one-on-one with Queen Elizabeth. And what transpired during that fateful evening would shift Beatrice's position in the firm forever. What had begun as a routine family gathering shifted dramatically when the Queen, without announcement or aid, requested Beatrice join her privately in the drawing room. The timing was no accident. The scandal surrounding Prince Andrew had intensified that week, headlines sharpening with new revelations. Beatrice, already under pressure, entered the room expecting reassurance. What she received instead was a question so sharp it pierced through every defense she had spent years constructing. The Queen, composed and controlled, looked at her and simply asked, "Do you believe your father?" No preamble, no emotion, just 6 words that split the air and cracked the illusion of distance Beatrice had tried so hard to maintain. She stood frozen, 1,000 memories rushing at once of childhood moments, of her father's laughter, of the headlines, the photos, the whispers. Her response came not in defiance, but in trembled breath. "I don't know anymore." That admission hung in the room like smoke. The Queen didn't respond. She simply observed. The silence was heavier than any rebuke. It wasn't judgment, it was disappointment, cloaked in royal stoicism. Beatrice felt it in every part of her being. She left Windsor that night, without saying goodbye to anyone. No press release would mention the moment. No family member would speak of it. But inside the walls of the palace, word spread quickly. Aides were discreetly told to avoid discussing the matter. Senior royals, when asked about Beatrice's demeanour, offered only carefully rehearsed smiles. That single conversation broke something within her. It was a cruel awakening, the realization that loyalty within the monarchy was conditional, and that silence, once seen as protective, had become suffocating. From that moment, a shift began. Subtle, but unmistakable. Beatrice started stepping back, not in defiance, but in self-preservation. She declined certain invitations, shortened speeches, and avoided events where her father's presence loomed over her like a shadow. The palace noticed. The press speculated. But no one, not even Eugenie, knew the full story of that night in Windsor. Because Beatrice never spoke of it again. Yet distancing herself from her father in public would prove easier than wrestling with the guilt haunting her in private. Hidden beneath locked drawers in a Kensington residence lies Beatrice's private diary, a raw, unfiltered account of a daughter wrestling with love, rage, and betrayal. She never intended for these pages to be seen. In the quiet hours of isolation, when palace walls felt more like prison gates and public scrutiny cut deeper than silence, Beatrice turned to the one thing the royal institution could not censor: her pen. She wrote with unflinching honesty, pouring emotions onto pages that were never meant for royal archivists or media interpretation. Addressed to Papa, these letters read like a daughter's cry into a void, fiercely loving yet edged with exhaustion. The lines that gripped insiders the hardest were never the most dramatic, but the most human. "I love you, but I can't defend you anymore." That sentence, repeated in varying forms across entries, marked the slow collapse of the identity she had anchored herself to since childhood. Her loyalty, once unshakable, had begun to fracture under the weight of lies, legal battles, and the suffocating expectation to stand beside a man she could no longer understand. The diary reveals a heartbreaking inner conflict. Beatrice wasn't merely angry, she was lost. Entry after entry, she wrestled with the burden of being her father's public shield, while privately questioning the truth behind the accusations. She wrote of shame, of having to face friends who no longer knew how to speak her name without wincing, of watching once cordial glances turn cold at galas and family gatherings, of holding back tears as she waved from royal balconies, knowing the public wasn't cheering for her, they were watching for cracks. One particularly devastating letter ends with the words, "Please stop asking me to lie." The implications are chilling, not only because of what it says about her father's expectations, but what it reveals about the role she was forced to play within the firm. What makes this diary so significant is that it doesn't read like a confession, it reads like a surrender. Beatrice didn't want to expose anyone. She wanted to survive, to find clarity, but in doing so, she recorded the unraveling of a bond that had once defined her entire sense of belonging. Sources confirm the diary has now become a point of contention behind palace doors. Some insiders reportedly pushed for it to be archived and sealed indefinitely, fearing the damage its contents could inflict on the monarchy's already fragile image. But Beatrice herself has resisted, insisting that some truths must not be buried no matter how painful. It's unclear who first leaked the details, but the impact has been seismic. Those close to the princess say she hasn't spoken of the diary publicly, nor has she denied its existence. But there's a new stillness about her, a quiet defiance. For the first time in her life, Beatrice has chosen her voice over her duty, but her private words would soon spill into a public battlefield when another royal ignited a confrontation Beatrice never saw coming. In a royal showdown that has divided the York sisters, Princess Eugenie allegedly accused Beatrice of abandoning their father. The two had once been inseparable until a tearful argument inside Clarence House ended their public unity. For years, Beatrice and Eugenie stood shoulder to shoulder, united not just by blood, but by the unspoken burden of being Prince Andrew's daughters. They faced the storm together, or so it seemed. But as the scandal surrounding their father deepened, their paths began to diverge. Eugenie, steadfast in her loyalty, refused to publicly distance herself. She held tight to the belief that family meant unwavering support, no matter the accusations or the fallout. Beatrice, however, had been quietly unraveling. She had seen too much, questioned too deeply, and felt the sting of public shame in ways Eugenie had chosen to ignore. The tension between them simmered quietly until one evening, it erupted into something neither of them could take back. It began as a discussion about a television interview Beatrice had declined to attend. Eugenie confronted her, her voice rising, accusing her sister of turning her back on the family at a time when unity was most needed. "You let the wolves eat him alive," she said, her voice trembling more with betrayal than anger. That sentence struck like a dagger, because Beatrice had always feared that very thing, but had come to accept that defending the indefensible would only destroy her too. Her response was just as sharp. "You're pretending none of it happened." And with those words, the room changed. The walls that once held shared memories and laughter now echoed with the weight of betrayal. Palace aides, sensing the conversation escalating into something dangerously uncontainable, stepped in to separate them. The sisters parted without a word. Since that day, their public appearances have been notably distant. No shared engagements, no side-by-side smiles, no effort to mask the fracture. Insiders describe their relationship as cordial but cold, a quiet split that has unsettled even the most hardened members of the royal household. For Beatrice, the fallout was especially painful. Losing the one person who truly understood the complexities of their shared experience only deepened her isolation. But there was no turning back. The break between them had become symbolic, a representation of the impossible choice facing those caught in Andrew's shadow. Stay silent and loyal, or speak out and be branded a traitor. Beatrice had made her choice, and the cost was written in the distance now visible between her and Eugenie. And as sister turned against sister, a far more calculated royal figure stepped in, drawing Beatrice into a new and unexpected alliance. It wasn't an official meeting, nor a televised moment, but when Catherine, Princess of Wales, reached out to Beatrice in a moment of emotional solidarity, the call would prove to be a lifeline and a subtle warning. In the midst of isolation, amid whispers in corridors and long silences from those who once offered smiles, it was Catherine who extended something unexpected compassion. She didn't have to call. No obligation, no palace instruction. But she did. Quietly. Privately. And in doing so, she crossed an invisible line few dared to approach. The call began with formalities, as all royal conversations do, but it shifted quickly into something raw and disarming. Catherine had felt it too, the sting of being judged not by your own deeds, but by the company you kept, the name you bore, the family you didn't choose. And so she spoke honestly, her voice measured but deliberate. That sentence shattered something in Beatrice. For months, she had been carrying the unbearable tension between duty and disillusionment. She had tried to hold the line, to shield herself from public collapse, to remain the daughter, the royal, the loyalist. But here was Catherine, a woman known for grace under fire, telling her that it was okay to step out from the shadow. It was okay to break ranks, if doing so meant protecting your own future. What followed was unexpected. Beatrice opened up fully, for the first time. She spoke not just of the scandal, but of the shame, the loneliness, the silent dinners, the knowing stares, the words she had written in her diary but had never dared to speak aloud. And Catherine, listening more than advising, simply said, "Your voice matters, even when it shakes." In the aftermath of that call, something shifted in Beatrice's posture, not publicly at first, but internally. A seed had been planted. One not of rebellion, but of awakening. She later described Catherine as the only one who listened, a quiet endorsement that carried immense weight given the walls that had gone up around her. The palace had become colder. Eugenie was distant. Senior royals avoided sensitive topics altogether. But Catherine, in one act of empathy, had reminded Beatrice that humanity needn't be sacrificed for protocol. That conversation would echo in Beatrice's mind weeks later as she sat before flashing cameras and broke down mid-sentence. It was the memory of that phone call of being told she didn't have to carry the shame that gave her the courage to stop pretending. Catherine hadn't told her what to do. She had reminded her of who she still was beneath the silence. But not everyone welcomed Beatrice's vulnerability, especially not the palace figure who feared her openness could trigger a new scandal spiral. King Charles is not a man known for emotional indulgence. So when Princess Beatrice's breakdown began making headlines, the monarch reportedly issued a quiet but firm ultimatum that could redefine Beatrice's royal future and threaten Andrew's final connections to power. The image of Beatrice, overwhelmed and tearful on national television, was not something Charles tolerated lightly. To him, the monarchy was not a place for public catharsis. It was an institution of image, structure, and unflinching control. Behind palace doors, the reaction to her emotional moment wasn't compassion, it was calculation. Senior aides convened immediately. Charles, stoic but simmering, made it clear this wasn't going to be dismissed as a daughter's emotional lapse. It was, in his words, a breach. A break in the invisible contract every royal signs the moment they accept the privileges of their position. Duty first, self second. Beatrice had made herself the story, and that, in Charles's world, was unforgivable. He summoned her privately, and those close to the moment recall a single sentence that cut deeper than anything her father had ever said. "You are either in the family or in the headlines." The message was unmistakable. There would be no tolerance for ambiguity, no grey areas. If Beatrice wanted to maintain her status, she had to silence herself, retract the vulnerability, and fall in line. But that moment of control came laced with consequence, because behind it wasn't just a warning, it was a threat. Talks began within the firm about quietly reducing the visibility of the Yorks, removing Beatrice from certain patronages, redirecting media exposure, and perhaps, most dramatically, considering the future of her and Eugenie's standing within the core family structure. Whispers of a permanent, soft exile spread through royal circles. Not an outright removal, never anything so dramatic, but a slow, strategic erasure. Invitations rescinded, trusts revised. A fade from prominence rather than a fall. It was the same tactic once used against distant cousins and former confidantes. And now, it was being wielded against a woman whose only crime was telling the truth about her emotional fracture. But in Charles's eyes, that fracture was dangerous. If one daughter spoke, others might follow. If one heir questioned the system, the whole structure could begin to tilt. For Beatrice, the pressure mounted not just from the institution, but from within. She had lost her sister's support. She had risked her public standing. And now, even the crown itself was turning cold. But this wasn't just a reckoning with power, it was a confrontation with legacy. For years, Beatrice had operated in the quiet corners of royalty, always loyal, always controlled. And yet, in the moment she chose to break that silence, the institution moved to erase her altogether. Cornered by bloodline, guilt, and pressure from the crown, Beatrice made one final move the monarchy never anticipated. In a televised special watched by millions, Princess Beatrice sat down in front of the world not to defend her father, but to reclaim her voice. What she revealed shocked even her fiercest critics, and left the royal family scrambling to reframe the narrative. The studio lights may have been soft, but the words she delivered cut like glass. For the first time, Beatrice spoke not as a royal, not as a York, but as a woman crushed under the weight of silence. Her voice, measured but brimming with quiet fury, outlined years of torment that had built behind palace walls. She spoke of sleepless nights, of hiding behind protocol while the world speculated on her loyalties, of the pain of pretending everything was fine when, in truth, her world had been collapsing from within. Then came the turning point, a single sentence that marked her separation from the past. "This is not about my father. This is about breaking the silence." The studio went still. The viewers, whether loyalists or skeptics, felt the shift. This wasn't damage control. This was a reckoning. She made it clear she would not speak for Prince Andrew again. Not in statements, not in interviews, not in defense. It wasn't a betrayal. It was liberation. For too long, she had been cast in the role of reluctant defender, forced to absorb the fallout of decisions she didn't make. But now, the line had been drawn. She was not absolving him, nor was she condemning him. She was simply removing herself from the narrative that had consumed her life. The public's response split instantly. Some hailed her as courageous, finally cutting through the veil of royal denial. Others accused her of abandoning family, of trying to preserve her own image at the cost of loyalty. Yet what couldn't be denied was the raw humanity of it all. This wasn't a press-crafted performance. This was a confession long delayed. Even the palace struggled to contain the shockwave. Aides quickly issued statements framing the interview as a healing moment, a personal journey, an act of private clarity. But their rushed tone betrayed the panic behind the scenes. Beatrice had stepped out of the carefully choreographed structure, and now the monarchy had to scramble to catch up. She ended the interview with a line that would echo far beyond royal circles. "I choose truth, even when it hurts." It was not an attack, it was a declaration, a warning, and perhaps a promise. But just when the dust seemed to settle, a new revelation would reopen wounds no one was prepared to confront. Days after Beatrice's raw public statement, a personal letter from Prince Andrew surfaced marked "private" for Beatrice only. What she did next would leave royal insiders stunned and raise new questions about where her heart truly lies. The letter didn't come through official channels. It wasn't delivered with palace seals or royal insignias. Instead, it arrived quietly, slipped into her private residence by a courier whose name remains unknown. Within hours, details of its existence began to leak first, as whispers among staff, then as a confirmed rumor circulating within royal correspondence circles. The letter, handwritten and deeply personal, revealed a father desperate to re-establish a connection, not with the public, but with the daughter who had just severed her role as his unofficial shield. In it, Andrew expressed regret not necessarily for what he had done, but for the consequences it had brought upon his family. He reaffirmed his innocence. He pleaded for unity. And perhaps most revealing of all, He begged her not to forget the father he had been before the headlines took over. Beatrice reportedly read the letter alone, in silence. Those closest to her say it broke her in a way the public never saw. The girl who had once clung to her father's every word was now a woman faced with the final collapse of the illusion she had fought to preserve. No reply was ever sent, no statement was ever made, and yet the silence spoke volumes. For a royal family trained to communicate in gestures and glances, this silence was deafening. The public, already divided after her televised confession, was left scrambling for interpretation. Was she rejecting her father completely? Was the letter a last-ditch effort to salvage their bond? Had she considered writing back? Royal analysts pored over every gesture in her next appearance, searching for clues. But Beatrice remained composed, neither confirming nor denying the story. The ambiguity left the nation suspended in a state of uneasy curiosity. Behind palace doors, speculation took a darker tone. Some believed she had made her decision, once and for all. Others insisted the emotional weight of the letter would eventually draw her back in. But no one knew for certain. And Beatrice gave them nothing to grasp, only the echo of a decision that refused to explain itself. To some, the act of locking the letter away symbolized closure. To others, it hinted at a wound too deep to confront. In the court of public opinion, forgiveness and betrayal wore the same face. But perhaps that's what made this ending so powerful, its refusal to offer a clean resolution. The same daughter who once stood beside Andrew now stood alone, unanchored but unbroken. And in that solitude, she may have finally found her voice, even if it meant walking away from the only version of family she had ever known. As Beatrice steps into an uncertain future, one truth remains: no matter how far she runs from the scandal, its shadow will always stretch across her legacy. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.